whether or not like this executive order is even remotely constitutional or not, because even the most ideologically captive Supreme Court would strike this down, which is why the angle of attack was on lower courts and their capacity to issue injunctions on executive orders that impact the entire nation. Let's get started with the Supreme Court. So for those of you who don't know, the Trump administration had a sequence of insane executive orders. Most of them are unconstitutional. And one of those executive orders was to revoke birthright citizenship. Okay. Now, obviously, this is completely unconstitutional. And they knew that it was completely unconstitutional, but they did it anyway. And what they ended up doing after getting an injunction from a lower court, from a court in, I forget which state, they had to put a pause on it, right? The case escalated all the way up to the Supreme Court, but there was one unique predicament in this. The Supreme Court decision was not around whether or not it was constitutional to, by executive mandate, revoke birthright citizenship. And it wasn't even, the Supreme Court decision was not even around whether or not birthright citizenship is constitutional or not, right? That wasn't what it was about. The Supreme Court decision revolved around another thing. How much power do state courts have in terms of stopping federal level decisions being made by the executive? And the Supreme Court decided they shouldn't have that much power at all. Here it is.
The court has just released a potential landmark decision impacting the future of birthright citizenship in the U.S. The justices were asked to roll back nationwide injunctions against the president's attempt to redefine the 14th Amendment, which states that anyone born in the U.S. is automatically a U.S. citizen, regardless of their parents' citizenship status. It's been in place for more than 150 years. But now, in a 6-3 split, the conservative majority ruled that President Trump can move forward with implementing his birthright citizenship change, except for those who brought the case, the 22 states and a group of pregnant immigrant women who brought that case. So it's not directly getting at the 14th Amendment here, but this will have a nationwide impact. Let's go ahead and bring in our Devin Dwyer, ABC's senior Washington reporter, who's been following the Supreme Court on this. Devin, it's not as straightforward as I think a lot of people were perhaps expecting or hoping to hear. So break down what this act.
This was a big surprise, Whit, and this is coming from the youngest conservative justice on the Supreme Court, Justice Amy Coney Barrett, 6-3.
What's interesting about this decision is that you don't make these kind of moves because the Supreme Court is obviously ideologically captured, right? And they work in a partisan manner. They sometimes decide against the Trump administration, but I think all of those decisions come down to upholding the legitimacy of the court to a certain degree, while simultaneously making important decisions like this one that will be truly impactful, truly beneficial to the Trump project overall. This is, maybe I'm misunderstanding this. Like, I'm not I'm not exactly a constitutional law scholar. I actually have a unique theory. I think it's all bullshit. But the way I see this is like, this is the kind of initiative you take only when you suspect that your movement is never going to lose power, which I think is ominous. I think this is the kind of moves that you make when you don't think that the opposition party will ever come into power, or at least you're operating on the knowledge that the opposition party is simply a controlled opposition party, and therefore they will never take advantage of this. What do I mean by this? Because going forward, let's say in the future where we still do have democracy, okay, in a hypothetical tomorrow where we still have democracy, right? Elections take place, Democrats win, and the Democratic Party that wins is actually resembling, I don't know, like a Zoran, AOC, Bernie, like a fighting Democrat Party that wants to take decisions at the federal level, behave like Donald Trump, right? But this time, instead of doing it at the behest of the corporate oligarchy, they do it at the behest of the citizenry, at the behest of the working poor, for example. The lower courts would not be able to issue injunctions against those federal decisions at that point, which, again, dangerous prospect for a party that might lose their grip on power. Not so dangerous if that party does not feel like they will ever lose their grip on power, or recognize that even if they were to lose their grip on power, they simply don't believe. They simply don't believe that the Democrats would ever take advantage of this, because as David Dayen points out, sounds like the nationwide injunctions on non-compete agreements, student debt relief, the COVID vaccine mandate, and much more are all lifted now. Or wait, is this only that nationwide injunctions aren't allowable for Republican policies? Also notable, Kavanaugh's view that today's decision apparently does not apply to agency challenges, and in cases under the Administrative Procedure Act, plaintiffs may ask a court to preliminarily set aside a new agency rule. It is like you don't up one of the powers that the lower courts have if you're not operating. Wait, is this real? Is this right now? Or this looks, is CNBC TV 18? This is not real. This is not live. This is not real. It's old. It's from earlier today. It's on the docket. Don't worry. One of these powers, unless you think the Democrats are never going to use it, or the Democrats are never going to be in power to begin with, which also, of course, reminds me of this fantastic moment where Trump told Christians at a meeting that they won't have to vote again after this one election. He was just like, just vote for me one last time, and then y'all are good. Y'all are good forever, you know? Just this one time, boys. I promise. Just this one time. And then you're good.
As you said, in a big win for Donald Trump, saying he can move forward with that executive order that he issued on day one, changing the definition of citizenship in this country. Practically speaking, it means the president can, in the next 30 days, begin to develop guidelines for how he would implement that. It does not mean, however, Whit, that this executive order is free from future legal challenge. Legal cases in 3 different districts will continue on the merits. The Supreme Court, in oral argument in this matter, did signal that it was skeptical that it could stand up to legal muster. But at this point, the court is really weighing in on the ability of individual judges in districts around the country to block a president's action nationwide. And what Justice Barrett said today is that an individual federal court judge does not have that authority to broadly block a president. The judge, he or she, can block an individual while a case is being litigated, and in this case, that was upheld. So, you know, this order, as it's implemented, cannot apply to those 22 states. It's going to be messy. It cannot apply to those particular pregnant women that are challenging this. But elsewhere in the country, and at the very least in the planning stages, the president can move forward, and that is a significant and surprising win for him.
What the fuck is the point of the union if every federal law is up to the states? I mean, in a weird way, this simultaneously takes away power from lower courts, so it takes away state power, but it also in the future could take away federal power depending on who or depending on what the decision is. Because like now you can't have lower courts make injunctions that pertain to nationwide issues. Like you can't have you can't have a lower court stop the executive order or the things that may come from an executive order, unless it's like up to an individual, I guess, unless it's directly impacting an individual. But it's also simultaneously, in the inverse, it simultaneously gives more power to the federal office, more power to the executive office if there is ever a Democrat in charge. And then they are basically now this unstoppable force. Do you see what I mean? Which is why I said it seems strange to do this unless you personally think you will either A, never worry about the Democrats taking advantage of this, or B, never have to worry about Democrats winning an election ever again. Ryan Grimm says this Supreme Court birthright ruling is more chaos for Social Security to handle Now, when a baby is born, depending on where it's born, the process for getting Social Security number won't be simple and automatic. Nightmare of chaos for new parents will follow. Does this also mean that anything doesn't receive a hearing by the Supreme Court cannot bind the federal government? I mean, lower courts are to the same degree. Hold on. One second. I have to keep... okay. Don't worry, the Supreme Court will change their minds next time blue Republicans get in power.
It sure is. Devin Dwyer, thank you.
It purports to remove forum shopping in trying to get nationwide injunctions, but allows each district to interpret the Constitution in their own way, which in turn will create undue chaos and burden on the system, breaking it whole. I don't know what happens to the federal government here. I don't know what happens to the lower court system here. Do they just preside over their individual districts? So America is a nation divided of just whatever the jurisdiction, the judicial jurisdiction is, where you just have this weird balkanization of courts, where in some places you're under a totally different banner. You're under a totally different banner and a totally different set of rules, whereas in other federal court districts you have a totally different set of rules. Like it goes even beyond like states. I don't know. What is this? Why does this video have no audio?
Decision. An amazing decision, one that we're very happy about. This morning, the Supreme Court has delivered a monumental victory for the constitutional powers and the rule of law in striking down the excessive use of nationwide injunctions to interfere with the normal functioning of the executive branch. The Supreme Court has stopped the presidency itself. That's what they've done. And really, it's been an amazing period of time this last hour. There are people elated all over the country. I've seen such happiness and spirit. Sometimes you don't see that, but this case is very important. I was elected on a historic mandate, but in recent months we've seen a handful of radical left judges effectively try to overrule the rightful powers of the president to stop the American people.
Nationwide injunctions have been a seminal tool for the Federalist Society to legislate the conservative agenda for decades because they know the Republican cannot maintain popularity indefinitely. The fact that they are willing to do away with this power signals they are moving into a new phase of the master plan in which they are beyond worrying about insurances against electoral uncertainty. That is why I'm saying this is a terrifying decision. You only make a decision like this if you don't foresee yourself losing the grip of power at the federal level ever. Or even if you, in the off chance, lose that grip of power at the federal level, you know you have 100% confidence that your opposition is not actually going to use this to their advantage in the same way that you have to advance your desires, to advance your legislative agenda by executive mandate. That's why I think it's like a strange decision, because injunctions have been utilized by the Republicans in perpetuity as well when Democrats are in charge. You see what I'm saying?
People from getting the policies that they voted for in record numbers.
That's a clown take. This is great. It prevents the courts who have no business in national decisions from interfering. Seems like something like that. Yeah, this makes no sense to me. Lower courts were out of hand with this. I mean, they're not. This ain't family court, brother. Like, this is, you're talking about federal courts. Like, what purpose do they serve? Also, the executive order is completely out of hand. What are you talking about? The executive order revoking birthright citizenship is transparently unconstitutional. It is blatantly unconstitutional. They know it's unconstitutional, which is precisely why they didn't even try to fight it on the grounds of constitutionality, whether or not like this executive order is even remotely constitutional or not. Because even the most ideologically captive Supreme Court would strike this down, which is why the angle of attack was on lower courts and their capacity to issue injunctions on executive orders that impact the entire nation. That's it. Zoomers really having their futures absolutely fried and further cooked in front of their eyes daily. That's a sidecar issue. I was talking about the courts themselves and their power range. To me, the power regular Fed courts had to stop things from passing was too high. I mean, I'm going to repeat this once again. You are talking like a man. You are talking like a man who personally believes that there will come a day when there will be a progressive party in charge that will take advantage of the additional power that they have at the executive office. Okay? You're talking like a guy who thinks there are, one, going to be elections in the future, which there might be, and there might not be, I don't know. And also that once the party wins those elections, they will also earnestly utilize this new unlimited power to their advantage to improve people's lives. And I don't think that's happening.
It was a grave threat to democracy, frankly, and instead of merely ruling on the immediate cases before them, these judges have attempted to dictate the law for the entire nation. In practice, this meant that if any one of the nearly 700 federal judges disagreed with the policy of a duly elected president of the United States, he or she could block that policy from going into effect, or at least delay it for many years, tie it up in the court system.
I guess in a way, doesn't this also kind of give more power and importance to the Supreme Court as well, turning it into the only court that can make impactful decisions at the federal level? And it's also obviously notoriously much slower than a number of courts that you could go to issue injunctions. And it's also completely ideologically captured by this president. And considering the demographic makeup of the court, it seemingly will maintain that power and maintain that slant for quite a while. I feel like it's very cooked overall.
This was a colossal abuse of power, which never
Not
occurred
good.
in American
Not good,
history
folks.
prior to
Believe me,
recent
not
decades.
good. Don't like
And
it.
we've been hit with more nationwide injunctions than were issued in the entire 20th century together. Think of it, more than the entire 20th century. Me. I'm grateful to the Supreme Court for stepping in and solving this very, very big and complex problem, and they've made it very simple. I want to thank Justice Barrett, who wrote the opinion brilliantly, as well as Chief Justice Roberts, and Justices Alito, Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and Thomas. Great people. Thanks for this decision.
No, it gives way more power to the executive. He's basically saying you need to front the money and lawyers to challenge illegal orders. Wait long enough for it to reach the Supreme Court. No, that's what I'm saying. No, I know. It gives tremendous power to the executive. It makes it infinitely harder to fight back against. And also, it adds a timeline on this that otherwise would be much faster, while simultaneously removing the power of injunction from lower courts and giving the only power to the Supreme Court, which once again is, at least in our lifetimes, most likely going to continue being slanted in a right-wing supermajority. So a lot of things would have to go super well for the Democrats. The Democrats would have to dramatically change their outlook. They would have to fight fairly hard to change the system, and maybe even like add new Supreme Court justices to the bench, like take the number up from 9 in an effort to somehow change the ideological makeup of the Supreme Court. Like, none of those things are going to happen, especially with this party that we have in our hands.
And thanks to this decision, we can now promptly file to proceed with numerous policies that have been wrongly enjoined on a nationwide basis. And some of the cases we're talking about would be ending birthright citizenship, which now comes to the fore. That was meant for the babies of slaves. It wasn't meant for people trying to scam the system and come into the country on a vacation.
That's literally wrong. That is what it is. Like, that's what it is. That's why it's birthright. You're wrong. Like, that's one attitude that people have because they want to dismantle birthright citizenship, but that hasn't held up in the courts. You know, this isn't the first time people have tried to change birthright citizenship, and the courts have upheld birthright exactly as the opposite of what he's presenting. Now, that might change in the future, depending on, again, how right-wing, how white nativist we've become. But ultimately, Donald Trump's assessment here is just incorrect.
This was, in fact, it was the same date, the exact same date, the end of the Civil War. It was meant for the babies of slaves, and it's so clean and so obvious. But this lets us go there and finally win that case because hundreds of thousands of people are.
It's very possible that nothing has changed regarding nationwide injunctions on birthright citizenship. While the court broadly limited nationwide injunctions, it said states may be entitled to them if it's necessary for complete relief. Two of the birthright cases were brought by states who argued they needed nationwide relief because patchwork citizenship rules would be devastating when people move from state to state. If district courts agree, then the nationwide injunctions will remain in place. But even then, don't you have to file it everywhere? Like, what happens to a birthright American citizen born in, let's say, California, where birthright is protected, when they go from the state of California to, let's say, the state of Texas, where in this world, there isn't an injunction, and therefore your birthright citizenship is rendered useless? What happens to Social Security, which is a federal process? Like, what do you do in that situation? Do you get deported back to California? None of this makes sense. This doesn't just give tremendous power to the executive office. This also kind of bricks the entire federal system. It depends. In this hypothetical, are they white? Let's say they're not white. Also, what happens to interstate commerce? What happens to travel from one state to the next? Like, if you're not surrounded by blue states, are you simply not allowed to travel by car to a different state because you're fearful that they might just ship you to CCOT? What happens to a truck driver who was born in one of these birthright states but is not protected now because there are some states where you are now considered an illegal citizen? Do you understand? Do you understand how stupid this is? Like, it doesn't make any sense. Just citizenship thing that we're talking about. Okay? Just off of birthright citizenship, constitutionally protected.
Pouring into our country under birthright citizenship, and it wasn't meant for that reason. It was meant for the babies of slaves. So thanks to this decision, we can now promptly file to proceed with these numerous policies and those that have been wrongly enjoined on a nationwide basis, including birthright citizenship, ending sanctuary city funding, suspending refugee resettlement, freezing unnecessary funding, stopping federal taxpayers from paying for transgender surgeries, and numerous other priorities of the American people. We have so many of them. I have a whole list. I'm not going to bore you, and I'm going to have Pam get up and say a few words, but there's really, she can talk as long as she wants because this is a very important decision. This is a decision that covers a tremendous amount of territory. But I want to just thank again the Supreme Court for this ruling. It's a giant. It's a giant. And they should be very proud, and our country should be very proud of the Supreme Court.
Truck driver argument isn't the best. Truck drivers unanimously dislike immigrants. Are you stupid? In this conversation, the person is not an immigrant, dumbass. The person is an American-born, formerly recognized by every state American citizen. This calls into question whether they are still recognized as an American citizen in every single American state. If you destroy birthright citizenship, and not directly destroy birthright citizenship, but try to tackle birthright citizenship by executive order and then contest the power that the lower courts have in issuing an injunction, a nationwide injunction. And unless you can issue a injunction in every single court or have the Supreme Court directly issue a decision on the main problem in and of itself, then you create this weird patchwork where you have a not so united states of America, a balkanized America with different legal systems and different forms of citizenship. It literally takes us out of even a European Union style structure. It's worse than that. Today,
and with that, I'd like you to listen to the words of Pam Bondi. She's an incredible attorney general. We're very proud of her. And as you know, Todd Blanche is with us, and we have so many others that worked on this case.
Does that mean you will be illegal? No. because I'm an American citizen right now, unless they denaturalize all people that were previously also recipients of birthright citizenship, then no. Which they might. Who knows? I don't know. Sky's the limit, I guess. You know?
And other cases. And I think they're doing a great job.
Probably
Pam,
not,
please
though.
say a few words.
Thank you, President Trump. Thank you for fighting for all Americans. Americans are finally getting what they voted for. No longer will we have rogue judges striking down President Trump's policies across the entire nation. No longer. Today, in the 6-3 opinion, Justice Barrett correctly holds that the district court lacks authority to enter nationwide or universal injunctions. These lawless injunctions gave relief to everyone in the world instead of the parties before the court. As the Supreme Court held today, they turned district courts into the imperial judiciary. Active liberal judges have used these injunctions.
Like, the reason why this exists, in theory, is so that the lower courts could expeditiously protect citizens and not create this legal limbo, right? Not create a structure where people are left unprotected, where people have to where people have to get together, figure out what kind of harm that might come about, illegal and unconstitutional decisions that the executive orders are creating, to create a class action lawsuit and then try to go to every court in the state, in the nation, and protect themselves that way, with the hopes that like all of those court cases will protect them at the end of this long, convoluted, and expensive process. I don't understand what this makes America look like, if that makes sense. Like, I don't know what America looks like going forward. I don't know what the American legal system looks like going forward. Like, we're just basically hoping that the administration that has routinely done illegal things and routinely overstepped the amount of power that the executive office is supposed to have, that is fully abiding by this theory that the executive office is supposed to be like a monarchy. We have to operate under the expectation that they're not going to overstep when this issue in and of itself is a matter of them already overstepping and doing something that is illegal and unconstitutional. So the only thing that will hold this country together is, I guess, a hope and a dream that the Trump administration won't actually violate pre-existing laws. A reminder, a random Fifth Circuit Texas judge, age 89, blocked all of these nationally under Biden, banned non-compete agreements, student debt forgiveness, cracking Supreme Court. Then it's fine. Just so everyone remembers how corrupt this court is. Yeah, no, 100%. That's why I'm saying this is terrifying, because you only make this decision if you think that either A, the Democrats will never come back into power because there might not be another election ever again, or when they do come back into power, they're not going to do this. They're not going to do anything like this. They're not going to use the additional power that they have to change, to help the working poor somehow.
To block virtually all of President Trump's policies. To put this in perspective, there are 94 federal judicial districts. 5 of those districts throughout this country held 35 of the nationwide injunctions. Think about that. 94 districts, and 35 out of the 40 opinions with nationwide injunctions came from 5 liberal districts in this country. No longer. No longer. These injunctions have blocked our policies, from tariffs to military readiness to immigration to foreign affairs, fraud, abuse, and many other issues. The judges have tried to seize the executive branch's power.
But this is literally how it works. This is how the courts work. There are obviously red districts with red judges. That's why people do judge shopping. That's why people go to different districts. This is how it's always worked. when a Democrat's in charge, when a Democrat's in power, and they make national decisions such as this one, you have Republican districts with Republican judges who issue injunctions to stop it. And when Trump is in charge, you have liberal judges in Democratic districts that stop that as well. It's this weird balancing act, okay? Trump is just tossing that aside. He's just like, nah, no more of this, which is basically supposed to shred the power the lower courts have. And you only do that if you have an idea that, like, you aren't going to lose your grip on power. Here's Lolo's proposal to get you to better understand, like, how much power the Democrats would have. Invoke the Defense Production Act to take public control of key supply chains, food, energy, water, pharma. Seize patent rights under Bayh-Dole Act and begin public production of insulin, PrEP, naloxone, and other essential meds. Declare vacancy and land hoarding as national emergencies. Prepare to tax or seize vacant units. Declare a national rent emergency and use federal emergency powers to suspend rent collection in federally funded housing and issue a moratorium on evictions using DOJ enforcement authority. Create a task force to determine targets for eminent domain, which will include vacant housing held by REITs, private equity, and landlords with over 100 units in major American buildings sitting empty, luxury condos, warehouses, or office buildings sustainable for adaptive reuse. Deschedule cannabis, psilocybin, and other Schedule I drugs via DOJ/DEA directive. Cancel all federal student debt via Higher Education Act 432A authority. Pardon all federal marijuana, sex work, and nonviolent drug offenders. Begin process to commute all remaining federal death row sentences. Order DOJ to stop all cooperation with local law enforcement for ICE raids, drug busts, and protests. Mass parole in place for all undocumented people using INA 212D5. End all ICE enforcement by memo. Dismantle agency via attrition. Appoint openly communist lawyers and labor organizers to head agencies and revive militant enforcement. Suspend all weapons sales and military aid to Israel and Saudi Arabia. REIT's real estate investment trusts. Like, this is technically something that a competent and ideologically minded Democratic rulership would be able to do if they were to seize power. And then one of the hurdles in its place, obviously, would be this lower court injunction that would stop this process dead in its tracks, as it did, as Paul McLeod is pointing to here. Basically, everything Biden tried to do, ban non-compete agreements, student debt forgiveness, cracking down on payday lenders, etc., was immediately blocked by nationwide injunctions from the Fifth Circuit. Next then president may have just been unshackled. That is, if there is a next Democratic president. But I guess also they left this in there as well. The Supreme Court ruled nationwide injunctions are bad unless they're used to block the administrative state. Nothing we say today resolves the distinct questions on whether Administrative Procedure Act authorizes federal courts to vacate federal agency action, authorizing the courts to hold unlawful and set aside agency action. Pronounce Paul McLeod. Paul McLeod. Isn't this kind of the Republicans' MO, considering Biden Democrats never actually use the executive power they get? No, when they did, this is what they did. Biden did try to use the executive power to do some of these things. Like student debt forgiveness was one of the most insane parts about this, because he does have the authority, okay? The president unconditionally has the authority. Donald Trump has done this, and Joe Biden has done this in a more limited fashion, because the Department of Education is under the control of the executive, okay? And therefore, because a lot of these student loans are offered by the Department of Education, they control whether or not they can collect that debt, okay? And they can just permanently push it into the future. That is, a de facto version of student loan debt forgiveness, okay? And the Biden administration had the power to do this, and they tried to do it, and obviously lower court stopped it, and then the Supreme Court ruled it unconstitutional. It's bullshit, but they did it anyway. Yeah, you can literally say you have until the year 3000 to pay back your federal debt. Yeah, they could have done that. That is well within the power of the executive.
And they cannot do that. No longer. And on immigration, on a side note, today marks 2,711 arrests on these terrorists and these gangs. Total arrest today with HSI investigations. And thank you, Stephen Miller. Thank you to Homeland Security.
Okay, shut the up. Here, let's see what he takes. He's going to take questions from here on out.
A very liberal state or a liberal judge or a liberal group of judges could tie up a whole country for years because their decision was sometimes...
Or when a liberal is in charge, Republicans could do so permanently. They could permanently eviscerate any kind of initiative taken by the executive when the executive is Democrat. That's the whole point of these injunctions.
Take years to overturn. We've overturned many of the decisions, but it would take years to do it. And we have to act quickly when it comes to illegal immigration. We have murderers, killers, we have drug dealers, we have what they've allowed to come into our country should never be forgotten. It should never be forgotten what they've done to our country. And we have to be able to act very quickly, and we're going to do that. Thank you.
Justice Amy Coney Barrett, sir, I know that you praised her and her opinion here in this case. She has taken some heat, though, from some of your supporters who have labeled her weak, a squishy, a rattled law professor. What is your take on that?
I don't know about that. I just have great respect for her. I always have. And her decision was brilliantly written today. From all accounts, yeah.
Transgender Mr. President, what would you say? Fear that this is more and more concentration of power in the White House and the executive.
Well, this really brings back the Constitution. This is what it's all about, and this is really the opposite of that. I mean, the question is fine, but it's the
this is everything that is in Trump's favor that corresponds to the multi-decade Republican project of the unitary executive theory, which is directly undermining the fundamental principle of the Constitution, or why it was even written, which is no kings, is actually the most constitutional thing you can do. Like, if the Constitution as a document is, if there's one primary takeaway from the American Constitution as a legal document, it is that it's supposed to be anti-monarchy, okay? Anti-king. That is literally the most important part of the United States Constitution, is that you are not supposed to be a king. You're not supposed to have a king. There's supposed to be a separation of powers that stops kingship from happening, stops monarchy from happening. It's the entire purpose of the American state. It was the whole reason why there was a Revolutionary War at all. It was to overthrow the dynastic monarchy rule, okay? That's it. There was a whole bunch of other stuff that they wanted to do as well. They were obviously white slave owners, so, you know, I'm not getting into the weeds of it, but like the one thing is no kings. This is yes kings. We're moving in the direction of yes kings. So it's technically the most unconstitutional initiative that you can engage in. And it's so funny that he's just like, nah, this is, you don't understand. This is actually super constitutional. This is exactly what the framers intended. It's not that matters all that much to someone like myself, but of course I will still try to weaponize the pre-existing institutional power and control that is out there to the advantage of the citizens broadly, if there is ever such an opportunity, of course. And Trump is gutting said institutional power at an alarming rate right now. We are moving slowly but surely into this this even scarier position where we go from shredding the powers of the courts to basically weaponizing the courts at the behest of whatever Donald Trump wants to do. Because there is a turning point here. If you were to go back to Nazi Germany, you have pre-Nuremberg race laws, and then you have post-Nuremberg race laws. When you put in a new set of laws that basically calcify the whatever hierarchy that you want to design society around, all of a sudden, then the courts are going to be hostile to the needs, and they kind of are already in many respects, but this accelerates that process as we move into the next step, the even scarier step, which is when the courts actually work in favor of the fascist, accelerating fascist state.
The opposite. The Constitution has been brought back.
Thank you so much, President Trump. Illegal crossings in the border are zero now.
Zero. Does everyone hear that? Zero. Trump 2028.
Do you intend, President Trump?
Who's that guy? I like him. He's working the cameras.
With this new reality, President Trump, in the border, do you intend to engage personally with leaders from South America, not only Central America, in order to tackle
I do that anyway.
this situation
I do that anyway.
And if you have a perspective of meeting some presidents from South America, as Brazil, for example.
Well, you see, as an example, not South America, but NATO over the weekend.
Yeah.
They have great respect for our country now. They did things that nobody thought was.
Turkifying at an alarming rate. We will once again. The Turkification of America is imminent. I repeat, the Turkification of America is imminent.
Possible. They took funding from 2% to 5%. Nobody thought they'd ever pay the 2%, and now they're paying the 5%. It's over $1 trillion more a year. Think of that, $1 trillion. Nobody thought that could happen. That's a different group of people, different countries. But we get along with a lot of countries. We are respected again. Our country, the U.S., is respected again. Was not respected 6 months.
Yeah, oh, totally. That is so right. So right, King. Everyone's constantly talking about how much they respect us, bro. Doors open.
Months ago, I can tell you. Yeah, go ahead, please.
Yeah, Mr. President, you have a deadline coming up on trade in 2 weeks. Which countries, if
On
any,
what?
on trade, on tariffs?
Yeah.
Sir, which countries, if any, are close to agreements with the administration?
Well, that's an interesting question. We've made a deal with China. We've made a deal with probably 4 or 5 different countries. With the UK, it was a great deal for both. And we're in the process of making some others. But ultimately, in fact, Scott is here. And Howard Lutnick, these 2 guys have been doing an incredible job. And the people that work with them have been doing an incredible job. But, you know, we have 200 countries. You could say 200 countries plus. We can't do that. So at a certain point over the next week and a half or so, or maybe before, we're going to send out a letter. We talked to many of the countries, and we're just going to tell them what they have to pay to do business in the United States. And it's going to go very quickly. But some of the bigger countries, so India, I think we're going to reach a deal where we have the right to go in and trade. Right now it's restricted. You can't walk in there. You can't even think about it. We're looking to get a full trade barrier dropping, which is unthinkable. And I'm not sure that that's going to happen. But as of this moment, we've agreed to that, go into in China. That's going to come a little bit down the road, but we're going to be trading in China. We have a lot of great things going, and we're getting along with countries, but some will be disappointed because they're going to have to pay tariffs. And we've taken in already hundreds of billions of dollars in tariffs. No inflation. The only problem we have is we have a Fed guy that doesn't understand what's happening, and it would be great if he'd lower the rate because we'd be able to borrow a lot cheaper. Yeah, go ahead, please. Why don't we keep it on this subject? This is such a big subject. You know what? Trade is so big, but this, I don't know, in a certain way, this might be bigger than trade. I think this is bigger than trade. Yes, please, go ahead.
I was wondering, though, if you could...
Go ahead.
Sir, on the transgender ruling, the Supreme Court ruling that parents with religious objections can pull their kids out of public school lessons that use LGBTQ materials. Pam brought it up. Your reaction to that ruling today, sir?
I think the ruling was a great ruling, and I think it's a great ruling for parents.
GDP report comes out on Monday, so we will officially be in a recession. No, you don't understand. It's a different terminology that they will use to describe it. But like, so did the Democrats, really. The Democrats did that as well when they were in charge. And all of the Republicans, bro, you've been putting on to watch Bernie on Rogan for so long. I've catched up. Le Mafeao. I still want to watch it with the community, though. I mean, I don't even... The reason why I haven't really watched it is because I feel like it's a long and convoluted conversation. I don't know how entertaining it is. It's like, we've heard Bernie say the same things over and over again. My man said catched up.
It's really a ruling for parents. They lost control of the schools. They lost control of their child. And this is a tremendous victory for parents. And I'm not surprised by it, but I am surprised that it went this far. It took us to bring life back to normal. So it's wonderful. It's parental. And I kept saying, we will give you back your parental rights. They were taken away, and this is a tremendous victory for parents. Yeah.
Mr. President, if you look at the back at the last week, it's been extraordinary in terms of the action in the Middle East. You were at The Hague. I'm wondering
hell
now,
of a week, hasn't it?
I'm wondering now if you believe that Iran. I'm wondering now, sir, if you believe that Iran has given up its long history of ambitions with nuclear weapons, or what you would like to see from them to prove that they do, and what type of meetings is your administration looking for next week with Iran?
So Iran wants to meet. As you know, their sites were obliterated. They're very evil nuclear sites. They were now has been proven. We had some fake news for a little while.
They're evil nuclear sites. The sites there, they're so evil, much more evil than regular nuclear sites. There's an evil aura to their nuclear sites, and we obliterated them.
The same people.
And if you say we didn't obliterate them, you're a liar, and you're hurting the feelings of our big, beautiful bombers, our big, beautiful bombers that worked long and hard to make these big, beautiful bombs specifically for this evil nuclear site.
People that covered the Hunter Biden laptop was from Russia, the same people that did 3 or 4 other Russia hoax.
Yeah, hit that. Hit that note too.
wait, just listen. They came up with something that delayed the credit that our great pilots and these great what talent that was, and they hit it right down in the spot. 52,000 feet. Think of this dark, no moon, you couldn't see a thing, and they hit the refrigerator door, as they say. That's the size of a target. And overwhelmingly, and it's amazing what was done. We're the only ones that could have done it, and we took out the 2 of the other sites also. In addition to that, we finished them off. That was a very evil intention. I believe that, and again, time will tell, but I don't believe that they're going to go back into nuclear anytime soon. They spent over $1 trillion on nuclear, and they never got it together. And nothing was moved from the site, by the way. To do that is very dangerous. It's very, very heavy material. Those cars were most likely the cars of masons because they were pouring concrete at the top, at the hatch, as you know, the hatch going into the nuclear site. They wanted to reinforce it, and they had some masons there pouring concrete. By the way, that concrete was obliterated. It hit exactly at the concrete. It was, I don't think it had a chance to dry. But everything's down there. It's under millions of tons of rock. Please. Yes.
Your administration has said that El Salvador is one of the safest countries in the hemisphere. So why haven't you yet canceled temporary protected status for that country? Was it part of the deal?
Well, we'll take a look. We've had a great relationship with El Salvador. They have a.
The more he says it, the more I don't believe it. Yeah. It's hard. He is not very convincing. I feel like he's not a particularly convincing person. They're so evil, so much evil, you wouldn't understand. We've done it. We eliminated the evil. He's very convincing to a lot of people. I know. But there's not much you can do about that, can you? I mean, I can try my very best to try and explain to people that this is most likely not true, but there's always going to be people that hang on to every word.
A fantastic leader. They built a massive prison system, and I don't know exactly why, but it's a hell of a system. And we bring people there, and when they go there, they don't get out.
Aren't cult leaders supposed to be charismatic? I mean, he is charismatic. He's charismatic in general, but he's certainly incredibly charismatic to his cult.
And frankly, when they hear they have to go there, they become very nice people. It's a tough system, but it's a brilliant system, and it's a system done by a very, very good leader. We'll talk about El Salvador. A lot of respect. Yeah, please.
Thank you. A question for you, and then a question for the Attorney General. As you go into negotiations and talks with Iran, are you demanding not only that there would be no uranium production inside of Iran, but also that Iran would turn over all existing stockpiles of uranium?
Dude, they're gonna do. There's reports already. There's reports already that state most likely going to allow Iran to continue enriching uranium at the level necessary for civil use. and that they will maintain their nuclear facilities. So I don't think that, I mean, who knows? Who knows with Trump? Okay, remember, and it's not just Trump. It obviously has a lot to do with, it obviously has a lot to do not just with Trump, but also with Israel as well. But it does feel like they're willing to go towards the JCPOA. However, I don't know what the Iranian side's perspective is on this because today he said this. He said, I dropped all work on sanction relief. Iran has to get back into the world order flow or things will get worse for them. Like he's doing the if you don't play ball with me. Like on the one hand, there's reports that they are willing to let Iran enrich uranium and have a civil nuclear grid, which is the JCPOA, right? Obviously, sanctions relief is the is what Americans are supposed to also allow or give Iran in exchange for not enriching uranium beyond 5% or 3 to 5%. But then that goes against Israel's interests. Israel does not want a JCPOA as they got Trump to toss it aside initially. So who knows?
Well, you know, we're a little early for that, but something like that, yeah, we'll do something like that. Let me say that I've been saying for 25 years, even as a civilian, you cannot let them have a nuclear weapon, and that's what happened. It's been obliterated. It would be years before they could ever get going, and I really think it's probably the last thing. They have to recover from a hell of a tough war.
Would you also be demanding that the IAEA have full rights to inspect in Iran?
Or somebody, yeah, or somebody that we respect, and including ourselves.
And a question for both the President and the Attorney General. Under birthright citizenship, if this is implemented, who would be tasked with actually vetting citizenship? And how, like, would this be a situation where you have nurses and doctors checking for citizenship of parents, or?
This is all pending litigation. It's going to be decided in October by the Supreme Court, and we'll discuss that after the litigation.
If you have an undocumented baby, would that baby then be an enforcement priority?
The violent criminals in our country are the priority now. Let me put it in perspective. Today marked the 2,711th arrest in our country of TDA members, just TDA. Everyone in this room agrees they are one of the most violent criminal organizations in the world. And the Biden administration let them walk into our country for the last 4 years. 2,700.
We cannot let these baby criminals into our borders. The Biden administration let these baby gangsters into our national boundaries, creating a network of baby gangs going goo goo gaga. In the past, when we had white babies that said goo goo gaga, that meant something along the lines of, I need milk, breast milk. I want to play house. What these criminal gangster babies are doing when they say goo goo gaga is they're saying it Mexican style. And everybody knows goo goo gaga Mexican style means, where is my fentanyl? Please put fentanyl in my binky. I need fentanyl to serve the white babies in the kindergarten. We must stop the baby terror.
111 of them today have been arrested in our country. That is the priority of Donald Trump. That is the priority of this country, of Homeland Security, of all of our lawyers, of FBI. That's the priority. That will be discussed in October when the Supreme Court hopefully rules in our favor, and we're very confident of that. But you should all feel safer now that President Trump.
Hamas Diddy Epstein Piker once said, old enough to count, old enough to mount. Your family is full of pedophilic mud people. How's it feel to see your brothers die in a fiery blast? Thank you for your wonderful contribution to the discourse chatter. I urge you to go and get some medication pronto. I think we've reached the maximum position. of haters where they're so angry at the mere sight of just me existing that they don't even make sense unless you're also locked into this like incredibly vile echo chamber that they're a part of. Like, this is a signal to no normal person that's in the periphery watching and going, hey, I wanted to tune into this political commentator to hear what he has to say about, like, you know, the Trump administration's new initiatives here. Like, what will the lower courts look like, right? Like, no one is going to look at this and be like, well, he seems to have some normal haters. Let me dive a little bit deeper into what these guys are saying. Like, they've gotten so angry at this point that they can't even, like, make a reasonable criticism. They can't even put out reasonable criticism that might actually bring more people to their cause. What even is a mud person? I think it's just like he's being racist. Like, he's saying, like, I'm a mud person and my family's like mud people because we're, you know, Turkish. I guess that's what it is, you know? Yeah. This guy made some interesting points. Wait, you found his logs in Asmongold's chat? Techie hit 1 mil. Lies. They can give you a bigger one. The roach is immune. You, Tectone, and Nick under the same roof. A new golden age. So you want Hasan in government? He's a Tectone fan, I guess. How you handle things like this every day? I mean, it is what it is. I think people are extra insane lately. They've gotten so crazy that there's not really much you can do about it. You know, I just wish them well.
For the 1800s, it was a very turbulent time. If you take the end day, was it 1869 or whatever? But you take that exact day, that's when the case was filed. And the case ended shortly thereafter. This has to do with the...
Uh-oh, looks like Mamdani's about to lose the racist child fucker vote. A litmus test for Democrats. If you support Mamdani, we will not support you. No, not the racist child fucker vote. That's a very important constituency. Oh no, the Dersh.
The babies of slaves. Very, very obviously, and I think we're going to win. People didn't. I don't think they went about discussing it right. I came along and we looked and we said, wait a minute, this is wrong. We've been looking at birthright citizenship wrong for years, but they've used it. The cartels have used birthright citizenship to get very bad people in, and what Pam's doing and what Todd and everybody else, what they're doing at DOJ and all over, FBI, ICE, Border Patrol. These are incredible people. They're trying to keep our country safe, and they don't want to have people come in. This is just another way that they get illegal immigrants into our country, and in some cases...
No, that's not the case at all, as a matter of fact, because it's still constitutionally protected. Birthright citizenship is still supposed to be constitutionally protected. It is not a way to smuggle illegal immigrants into the country. It's a way to increase the American birth rates, which is seemingly something that you're supposed to be very concerned with. So I cannot figure out why Donald Trump and his administration is particularly disturbed about the number of American citizens growing, the population size growing. These are not undocumented immigrants. These are American citizens, natural born, not even naturalized American citizens, natural born American citizens. They're just American citizens. That's all they are. So when you say they're not American citizens, including maybe even people like myself, you're basically saying that you are in the process of picking and choosing who gets to be a citizen and maybe even potentially denaturalize people. Not being sufficiently American by your metric. Now, considering that in the eyes of the law, this constitutionally protected rule that implies that these people are American citizens, why is it that you're calling them illegal? Why? What is the additional factor here? Is it perhaps whatever you consider to be a real American versus a fake American? I don't know. Kind of feels like it, no?
Very, very bad ones. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. On your tax bill, if I could for a moment, senators are racing to rewrite parts of it right now after the Senate parliamentarian ruled that sections of it were outside of the process that they're using to get this through. Do you think that senators should respect the decisions of the parliamentarian? And what have you personally done in the last 48 hours to try and get Republican senators who are against the bill to a yes?
Well, look, it's a great bill. It's a massive tax cut. If it's not approved, your taxes will go up by 68%. Think of that, 68, a record, the highest in the history. The Democrats won't approve it only because politically it's so good for the Republicans. The Democrats aren't approving it. But think of what they're not approving. They're not approving border security. We've done a great job at the border, but we have to add some wall. We have to do, various things. We have no money for that. We have no money for the border. We have no money for so many things. But if the Democrats, it'd be interesting to see if we get any Democrat votes. We should. If I were a Democrat, I would absolutely, maybe Fetterman, because he seems to be the most sensible one lately. If I were a Democrat, I would vote for this bill all day long because it's tax cuts and so many other things that are common sense. They're basic things. I think they're doing fine. The parliamentarians been...
Nothing has been basic or sensible or common sense with this administration. Everything is the exact opposite of common sense. It has been insane, completely insane.
A little difficult, and I would say that I disagree with the parliamentarian on some things, and on other ways he's been fine. But we'll have to see. It's a big issue. I will tell you this: if that bill doesn't pass, the country will get a 68% tax increase. So think of this. You're a Democrat and you vote against it. That means you're voting in favor because essentially you're voting in favor of the largest tax hike in the history of our country. And you can't do that.
No, that was you. And it's not even a tax hike. It's just going back to the previous levels that you changed in your first term. This is the way that Republicans, in an effort to avoid additional Congressional Budget Office scrutiny, the way that Republicans do their tax cuts is, at least in the history of at least in recent American history, is always to sunset them, okay? Knowing full well that by the time the sunset provision kicks in, there will be a tax. They can present it as a tax hike, right? Normally, this was supposed to be the issue that the Democrats have to deal with because Trump thought that he would be a two-term president. Okay? He didn't. He did become a two-term president, but not in the way that he thought he would be. So now he has his own tax cuts sunsetting and raising taxes back to the level it was at before he actually did the tax cuts, with the exception of the corporate tax rate, which he permanently cut. So when he says the Democrats are voting for a tax hike, it's not. It's just your bill that you passed last time you were president.
In addition, we're cutting costs by $1.7 trillion, and it won't affect anybody. It's just fraud, waste, and abuse.
Mr. President, a leading global economist just did a 180 and says your tariff plan, you may have outsmarted everybody with it. What is your message?
I love this. I love this question. This is the favorite. This is the best.
You are exactly right, and it's how these bills pay for themselves by expiring tax cuts and putting in austerity measures down the road. This big, beautiful bill has taken it to an extreme. All of the benefits and tax cuts are instant, but all 100% of the how do we pay for it don't even start for 4 years. It's insane. And of course, the how do we pay for it is literally cutting the existing social safety nets. For the record, it's tax cuts for the wealthy. Because the tax cuts for the wealthy are always going to be far larger than the tax cuts for people like yourself in this chat. Working class will experience a minor tax cut, okay, as opposed to the majorly consequential tax cuts the wealthy will have. And then on top of that, the way that you game the system to make sure that this doesn't like create a ginormous hole in the deficit is by, on the other hand, cutting expenditure, cutting social safety nets, making it harder for people to get Medicaid, making it harder for people to get SNAP benefits. So it literally is over the working poor the hardest. Don't most people hate this bill sucks? I think most people haven't been paying attention to this, and Americans broadly think tax cuts are a good thing because they have no confidence that the federal government is actually going to do right by them anyway. They have completely lost any sort of hope that even those who do pay attention at least a little bit of attention to this kind of stuff, have completely lost all notion that the taxes that we pay are going anywhere but Israel and child annihilation in the Middle East and in the global South in general. It's never, they don't see it. They don't see any sort of benefit to it. And a lot of the benefits are invisible anyway. This is the problem with defending the federal government, right? Working at maximum capacity, it's invisible. You don't think about all of the things that the federal government is doing. That is when it's working, it's basically invisible. It's only visible when it's not working, right? You never turn around and look at like a road. Let's say if it actually worked, if the roads were paved perfectly. You never look at that and go, wow, I love how perfectly paved our roads are. You only recognize it when it's not, when there's a ginormous pothole. That and Reaganomics have basically destroyed Americans and any sort of like fleeting hope that they had that the federal government would ever do right by them and that the taxes would ever actually help them in a meaningful way, even though it still does. Even with the uneven distribution, even with all of the expenditures going mostly to the military industrial complex and all these other ridiculous places, even with all the bloat, even with all the private-public partnership that's basically just a subsidy for private corporations to not really do the things that the government is supposed to do efficiently, there is still a bunch of those taxes that go to education, healthcare, and the social safety nets, right? Having said that, most Americans either A, don't see it, or B, only see the worst parts of the government not working or failing to work, and therefore they are way more invested in what is known as starving the beast. Changing the attitude requires changing the broad American attitude. But you benefit from his tax cuts? I do, and yet I still advocate against it. Perhaps you should recognize that maybe I have long-term stability and American prosperity in mind when I advocate against my immediate short-term benefits. That's yes, I am not a trans person, but I advocate for trans rights. I'm a white guy, but I advocate I advocate against police brutality and disproportionate targeting of black neighborhoods. It's called empathy. It's called empathy, but you can make a selfish and self-serving argument as well. I want a more stable and prosperous society to live in. I want future generations to also live in a more stable and more prosperous society that's moving in the positive direction rather than a direction that is harmful, a direction that is ultimately negative. That is my goal. That is why I advocate for the things that I advocate for, even if it doesn't immediately help me in the short term. But then just donate all your money and you won't be benefiting from the tax breaks and you will also help current society. Every time. Even if Jeff Bezos, with the unlimited wealth that he has, that is insurmountable, unimaginable in comparison to someone like myself, okay, were to do that, it wouldn't even put a dent in the current systems of oppression, the current hierarchy, okay? But he isn't crying about the bill. You are? Okay, you're right. Make another comparison. I could make a million comparisons. I don't think that's going to actually help you understand anything. I'm advocating against something that is presented to me as my immediate short-term benefit because I'm thinking of long-term stability for everyone. Because I believe that this would yield a more egalitarian society, would yield a more prosperous society for every single person, a more evolved society. Okay? People like you would do better in this process. I don't think it is that consequential for someone like myself to increase their take-home pay by 5%, 6%. I'm perfectly happy with a increased top marginal tax rate, for example. I advocate for it. I'm perfectly happy with restructuring the way taxing works so that there is even a wealth tax on top of that, so that there is a more even distribution of wealth in this country. I want workers to have autonomy in their lives. I want people to be able to enjoy things. I want in the short term to move in the direction of European-style social democratic reforms. This would create a more prosperous America. You, on the other hand, are not benefiting from this at all, and you're yelling at me for not advocating for my immediate short-term goals, my immediate short-term benefit. Would you actually appreciate it if I were to say, hey guys, this is actually, to lie to you and say, hey, this is good for you. Meanwhile, it's actually just good for me, right? In the short term. Of course, Jeff Bezos isn't crying because he's self-interested. He likes this. He thinks it's awesome. So you know the big beautiful bill has terrible numbers for approval. The media has treated it kind of accurately in the news, so people hate it because I'm not kidding. It adds too much to the deficit. Somehow people care this time. I think it's the funniest reason to hate on this this ginormous wealth distribution to the super wealthy while directly stealing from the pockets of the poorest people. Like, look at this. Yeah, this is class warfare. This bill is a perfect demonstration of class warfare. For the top 20% richest Americans, they quite literally they benefit tremendously from this. People that can't take advantage of the pre-existing social safety nets because they're above a level of wealth in this country do not get harmed by this at all. Ironically enough, it is quite literally impactful for people that are in this chat. Like that chatter that was saying, like, why are you crying about this if it actually is beneficial for you? I don't understand how to explain to someone that is so invested in defending the super wealthy, even when it directly hurts their bottom line in the short term and also in the long term. Like, how am I supposed to make you develop not only empathy, because you don't even need empathy in this process. I need you to learn self-preservation. You should be way more mad than me, but you have been lied to and you think this is good somehow because your team is winning, I guess. But you ain't part of the team, little bro. That's the whole point. It's a big club and you're not in it.
Best question I've ever been asked, because I've been going through abuse for years on this. Because as you know, we're taking in hundreds of no inflation whatsoever.
But Mr. President, what is your message to critics who think your tariff plan will cause a recession?
I think they should go back to business school. It's so obvious. It's so obvious. I mean, we're taking in billions and billions of dollars from China and a lot of other countries. We took in, I had a call from somebody in the House and a high official. Sir, we have a problem. We don't know what to do. The books are a mess. I said, what do you mean by the books? The books, the money coming in. It's so terrible. I figured, oh boy, what's this? I don't like this question. I said, so what seems, there's so much money. There must be some kind of an accounting mistake because we have hundreds of billions of dollars more money than we thought. I said, do me a favor, go check call me back. You have to call me back. Check the tariff column. He calls me back 2 hours later, says, you're right. We took in $88 billion in tariffs. They have so much money coming in.
True story.
But more important than the money coming in, we have companies coming in, factories coming in, auto plants being built. AI is being built here instead of being built all over Europe and Asia. We have all of it. We have over $15 trillion, just about, Scott. I think we're right about that number. We went to Saudi Arabia. We went to Qatar. We went to UAE. Very smart people, very smart leaders, great leaders. And we took in $5.1 trillion just there. Without the tariffs, I mean, they also liked a thing called November 5th, November 6th, and November 7th. That was a very good little period of time. It's called the presidential election. You know, you used to have one-day election. Now you have it go over it. But even if you just took that little period, because it was pretty obvious it was going to be a landslide. And they like that, but they love the tariffs. I had Texas Instruments come in the other day, big company, and he said, we're putting in $60 billion into new plants and new equipment, new everything. Sir, you're going to keep the tariffs, aren't you? Because if I ever took the tariffs off, and we are going to absolutely keep it. And they're worried that somebody that, like this communist from New York, someday gets elected. I can't believe that's happening. That's a terrible thing for our country, by the way. He's a communist. We're going to go to a communistic state. That's so bad for New York. but the rest of the country is revolting against it. But if somebody got elected, they're afraid that if this was taken off, well, we're going to guarantee it's never going to be taken off. And again, we're taking in think of this, hundreds of billions of dollars. And they were all confused because they've never seen this before. You know, it's always the other way. We don't have enough money. So much money is coming in at levels that nobody's ever seen. But most importantly, we have factories being built, car plants being built, companies moving to our country like never before. If you look at 15 trillion, and that's only in a few months. You know, I haven't been here that long. Presidents like the last one was a disaster. He's the worst president in the history of our country, by the way. What he did on our border can never, ever be forgotten. To me, that's the worst of all the things. And he's done some terrible things, grossly incompetent. Nobody knew it was him because I don't think it was him. I think it was whoever was controlling the auto pen. But our country is doing great. And those leaders and other leaders, I just left, as you know, a large group of the most highly respected people. And that includes big countries. When you look at Germany and France and Spain, although Spain didn't come through, but they will. By the way, guaranteed they will. That was the only country that sort of tried to hold back on putting up the money. But just so you know, they said, it's unbelievable what's happened to the USA. You were a dead country. We didn't respect the country, the leader. You were dead as a doornail. One said to me, you went from being a dead country, you are right now the hottest country anywhere in the world. The whole world is talking about the USA, and everybody wants a part of it, and they're pouring into our country, and you're going to see those numbers. Thank you for that question. Yeah, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have a question about trade. Secretary Bessent.
So much of this is just like delusional wish casting. So much of it is just like, no, the country was in tatters, and now we've made it great. It's crazy. Everyone's saying it's the greatest it's ever been. They're telling me Mr. President is so hot. Hot. Yeah. Also, obviously, the U.S. economy shrank faster than expected in Q1. New data shows. First quarter gross domestic product growth was revised lower Thursday in light of reduced consumer spending, surprising economists. Don't know why that's surprising. GDP 0.5% on an annualized basis, 0.3 percentage points lower than the last measurement from the Commerce Department. Economists were expecting the number to stay the same, 0.2% contraction. GDP shrank in the first quarter, mostly because of lower consumer spending and a pull forward in imports ahead of President Trump's tariffs. Imports are a subtraction in the GDP calculation, which also includes investment, public expenditure, and exports. Thursday's downward revision reflected lower consumer spending, mostly in recreation and transportation. Together with private investment, first quarter spending was 0.6% points lower than the previous estimate. The Federal Reserve, along with other forecasters, have reduced U.S. growth outlook for this year. The June projection was for growth of 1.4% for 2025, down from 1.7% forecast made in March. The World Bank is also predicting a 1.4% growth for U.S. this year. Despite lower estimates, the Fed is in wait-and-see mode on interest rate cuts, which would stimulate growth by making bank lending cheaper to businesses. The Fed is concerned that lowering rates would allow prices to rise, which are already expected to receive upwards pressure from the new tariffs.
Has said that he hopes tariff deals with major partners will be done by Labor Day. So if some deals are not done by your July 9th deadline, will some countries' tariffs go back up, or will they stay where they are now?
Well, there's some countries that are used to ripping us off, to be honest with you. And I don't want to name them, but you sort of can name them. And they're so used to just, taking it billions and billions of, look, we had a trade deficit of more than $1 trillion. Think of a trade deficit. That's because nobody cared. We cared a lot when, I took in hundreds of billions of dollars in tariff. We had the greatest economy in history up until now. I think we're going to blow it away. But during my time, and especially prior to COVID, we had the greatest economy in the history of our country. I think we're going to blow it away now based on the kind of numbers that we're seeing. But